Well, good morning, everybody. Happy Mother's Day. Let's try this again. Happy Mother's Day. Yes. Yeah, this is such a fun day. I'm personally so grateful for my wife. She's not only an incredible wife, but she's an amazing mom, and she does so much around our house to really make sure that our kids are just continually set up for success and to tackle the day. She honestly does a lot for me to make sure I'm able to do the same thing. I'd be a train wreck without her, guys. So this is all 100% my wife. And really, I feel like sometimes part of my job is just to make sure I don't cause too much havoc. Like I try to stay out of the way the best I can to not mess up some of the stuff she's doing. And I feel like every once in a while I mess things up pretty big. And I was thinking back last week, it was a fairly normal morning for us. Kind of one of those mornings you get up and you have the same routine that you're doing. You're trying to get the kids ready for school, and so we're trying to get them dressed, get them downstairs. Someone's got to make breakfast, feed the kids. Someone's going to pack the lunches, and all of this we're trying to do in an hour to get them out of the door on time and without being hurried. And we managed to get them out the door every day, but the whole idea of not being hurried is something we're still working on. But my wife does a great job with this, and this was one of those mornings that we got them out the door, and it was like this moment of peace. Like the kids are out of the house, we can just take a deep breath, we can relax and enjoy the moment. So we both poured ourselves a cup of coffee and we sat down, and it was like now we can like connect. We can talk about what happened the day before, we can talk about what's planned for the day, we can even talk a little bit about some of the things that are coming up in the weeks and the months ahead. Like we were adulting like hardcore in this moment. And so we're talking, and my wife's kind of sharing some of these things on her calendar, and out of nowhere, it just hit me. And maybe you've had this happen before when you're just having a conversation, and then suddenly your mind starts to be filled with all of the things that you didn't get done. And so like in that moment right away, I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't respond to that text. I didn't reply to that email that's sitting in my inbox. I did some of the things on my to-do list, and like I didn't check them off, and I found myself starting to be overwhelmed a little bit about all the stuff that I still needed to do or didn't get to the day before. But it's okay, because I have a superpower. I can multitask. I'm really, really good at multitasking. At least that's what I tell myself. My wife says I'm not as good as I think I am. But as she's talking about all the things that are coming up, I'm thinking, no problem. I'm just going to pull out my phone real quick, and I'm going to start doing all the things I didn't get to yesterday while she's telling me, and this whole morning will be great. Well, as I'm replying to these emails, as I'm responding to the text, as I'm knocking the things off of my to-do list, I don't really catch the fact that my wife has stopped talking. And I kind of like pop my head up from my phone, and my wife asked me this question. She says, when did you decide to opt out of this conversation? Ouch. Yes. And in that moment, I did what so many of us men do when we know we're completely and utterly wrong. I got angry. And I remember being like, well, I'm still here. I'm doing two things at once. And then I leveraged my other superpower. My other superpower is I have the ability to completely rewind conversations and play them back in my mind, because I'm thinking, you know what, here's the thing. If I could tell my wife everything that she said, then she would have no reason to be upset at all. And so as I'm, being angry about the fact that she's calling me out for this, I'm replaying this conversation in my mind, and then I begin to tell her everything that she said. Again, she have nothing to be angry about. Well, guess what? She didn't care that I knew the information. She cared that I stopped being present in the conversation. And it took me, some time from that to really see things through her perspective, but she's absolutely right. Like none of us enter into any conversation thinking, man, if I could just have half this person's attention, it would be the best conversation ever. Like all of us, when we want to have a conversation, we want to have that conversation with people who are fully present. And I realized what my wife didn't want was just someone who was there, who was able to take in and process large amounts of information. I tell you that story because I think for some of us, we feel that same way about God. We think, well, here's the God who's created the universe. He spoke it into existence. He's kind of made all this, and he's able to kind of process all of the information, process everything that's happening in our lives. But at the same time, for some of us, our experience when it comes to God is that he's not present with us in those moments. You see, this weekend, we're continuing in this series we've called I've Got Questions. And over the course of this series, we're going to be tackling questions, really tough questions of life and faith. And if you've been with us, some of the questions we've talked about is, how do we know that God can be trusted? And last week, we talked about a God that seemingly is all about rules. And we kind of looked at both of those and answered them from a biblical perspective. And I tell you that because I think even if you weren't here, you've probably found yourself kind of thinking through some of those questions as well. Can God be trusted? Why is God always about rules? And if you didn't catch either of those messages, I encourage you to go online to lakesawyerchurch.org, and you can catch up on those messages right there on our website. But this weekend, we're going to be continuing, and this is the question we're going to be asking. Where is God? And when we ask this question, what we really want to know is God present in our lives? Where is he? Like, where's God in these joyous moments? Do we experience him? Do we feel him? Where's God in the moments of pain, in the moments of frustration, in our moments of fear? Where is God seemingly in our everyday lives? And as we struggle to feel his presence, it can be complicated because the truth is, if you open up the pages of the Bible, you see there's all these stories about God who was so present in the lives of so many people. Whether he was healing the sick or giving a voice to the marginalized or caring for the poor, he was coming alongside people in a very present way. He was physically there, and we see that. We see all these historical, just images of God's presence, and yet in our world today, we kind of walk through life, and again, some of us feel like, well, where is he? Where's God? And that's exactly the question that we hope to answer today. And to answer that question, we're going to look into the Old Testament. It's the first half of the Bible, and we're really going to look at one book that's really in two volumes. It's called the Book of Kings, 1st and 2nd Kings. And it tells us about the history of the people of Israel, God's chosen people. And in particular, we're going to look in 1 Kings, beginning in chapter 19. And we're just going to jump right into the story. And so this is what we read, beginning in 1 Kings chapter 19. Now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed the prophets with the sword. So just for context sake, some characters, some people that you might need to know, maybe you're not aware of them. Ahab is the king of Israel. He's the 7th king of Israel, God's people. And Ahab wasn't really a good guy. Like, that wasn't his MO. He was known for his wickedness and how he treated people. And so he's the king of the people, and we're told that he tells Jezebel. Now, Jezebel is his wife. His wife is from a foreign nation. She worships a foreign god, and so this has caused all sorts of problems within the nation of Israel, because the nation was clear that we are to worship the God of Israel and that God only. And now Jezebel is coming in, and she's got this God of Baal and all of her worship, and people are confused. And the reality is, Jezebel just wants what Jezebel wants. Just like her husband, she's not really that great of a person either. Like, the truth is, Jezebel is just an angry mom with murderous intent. It's like the perfect setup to any Mother's Day story, right? You cross a mom, she can be an angry mom with murderous intent. All right, anyways. Then there's this third character of the story, Elijah. And we're told that Elijah is a prophet of Israel, a prophet of the God of Israel. And there is something that happens in the chapter before this. And I'd encourage you just to go and read 1 Kings 18, but it's without giving too much away. God shows up in this incredible, powerful way. And what happens is the prophets of Baal, the prophets of Jezebel's king, all end up getting killed. And so Ahab is telling Jezebel everything that had just happened. And Jezebel is angry. Jezebel is frustrated. She feels like her king has been disrespected. Her God has been dishonored. And so we're told this is what Jezebel does. Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them." So Jezebel takes some of her messengers and she sends the messengers out to Elijah, and basically their message is, you're going to die. Like Jezebel's promising, look, I will commit that I am going to do to you what you did to the prophets of my God. And if I don't, then I will meet the same judgment as they do. And if you're Elijah in this moment, what are you going to do with this information? How are you going to respond to these messengers? I already mentioned that in chapter 18, we see that God showed up in this powerful way. God did something amazing, and Elijah was a part of what God had done. And so maybe it would be easy for us to assume, well, knowing how strong and powerful his God is, that Elijah told the messengers, you know what? I don't care what Jezebel wants to do to me. Maybe he said to them, you know what? Why don't you go back to your queen and tell her what she thinks and what she says, it doesn't matter. Maybe Elijah doesn't even want to take an audience with these messengers because they're not even worthy of his time, because his God is so powerful that God will do whatever he needs to do to protect Elijah. Like all of these things could have been how Elijah responded. But this is how Elijah actually responded. Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there, while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. And so Elijah gets this report from Jezebel's messengers. He doesn't lean on the strength of his God. He doesn't seemingly trust that God will continue to be by his side and protect him. And so what he chooses to do is to take off, to run. He's thinking, I'm going to run as far as I can, as fast as I can, to get away from Jezebel, to get out from her control, and then maybe I'll be safe. But he's also very strategic in it as well, because he comes to the point where he leaves his servant. The servant is the only person with him. The servant got him here, but he leaves the only other person on this planet that would know the precise location of where he's at. He leaves him and goes a day out into the wilderness to hide himself, to hopefully protect himself from Jezebel and her men. This is what we read in the second half of verse 4. He came to a broom bush. He sat down under it and prayed that he might die. I've had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. Like Elijah gets to this point where he's literally praying that he would die. He's so afraid. He's so scared of what might happen that he thinks, God, I would rather have you take my life. I would rather die at your hands than experience what Jezebel and some of her men might do to me. Now, the thing is, this isn't where Elijah's story ends. We're told that in this moment of desperation, an angel of the Lord comes to Elijah and gives Elijah food and gives Elijah drink, things to help him regain his strength. And the angel tells him to travel 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Horeb. It's also known as Mount Sinai. To a cave and to go there. And the angel told him that when you arrive, God will meet you on that mountain. And so Elijah does what the angel asked him to do. He reaches the cave. It's been a long journey, 40 days, 40 nights. And so when he gets there, he falls asleep. And then the next morning, in verse 9, this is what we read. And the word of the Lord came to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Elijah's probably thinking, "I don't know, God. You told me to come here. Like the angel of the Lord told me that this is where I was to come and that you would meet me here." Now, if I was Elijah, I tend to be a little sarcastic. I'd be like, "I don't know, God. Like, I'm just here to relax. Like, a little Netflix, a little mint and chip ice cream, and a binge watch all 9 seasons of The Office. Like, what do you think I'm here for, God? You told me to come here." But Elijah, what he does is he uses this question. He uses this moment to complain about everything that he's experienced. He tells God, he says, "Look, your people have completely walked away from your commandments. They've turned their backs on you. They've destroyed your altars. And as a matter of fact, they've killed every single one of your prophets." And Elijah says, "And I'm next. God, this is what your people are doing, and now I'm on the run because your people have fallen so far away from who you called them to be." And this is what God says to him in response in verse 11. "The Lord said to Elijah, 'Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord. For the Lord is about to pass by.'" And this word here, this phrase, "pass by," is really intended to sort of denote movement. What God is saying is, look, I'm about to move. Be prepared for me to move. And so Elijah does what God asked him to do. He goes out to the face of the cave, the mountainside, and we're told in that moment that a great wind comes over the land, and it shatters the rocks, and it's just taking down everything in its path. And literally Elijah's thinking to himself, okay, this is where God is going to move. This is how God is going to pass by. Surely this movement, so big, so powerful, is evidence that God is at work. But if you know the story, we're told that God wasn't in the wind. And then after the wind, the earth began to shake. And there was a great earthquake. And Elijah's probably thinking, okay, God, if you weren't in the movement of the wind, then surely you would be in this movement. Surely as the earth shakes, as things fall apart, that is evidence of your presence. But the text tells us that God wasn't in the earthquake either. And then there's this fire that just erupts out of nowhere and just burns up the mountainside. Surely God would be in the fire. Surely it's this movement that would show us the power and the presence of God. But again, we're told that God was not in the fire. He was not in the gust of the wind. He was not in the shaking of the earth. He was not in the heat of the flames. And Elijah's thinking, God, you are a big God. God, you move in powerful ways, but yet in each of these things, your presence isn't there. Where is God? And if you know the story, you know after these 3 movements that God speaks to Elijah in a gentle whisper. That it was in the stillness, in the quiet of the moment, that Elijah experienced God in a profound way, in a way that he never expected. You see, Elijah was expecting God to do something grand, to do one of these other things. That was the way that God moved. That was the way that God showed his presence. But he was missing what God was doing. And I think so many of us do the same thing, because the reality is so many of us are looking for God to do something huge, to do something magnificent, that we forget or we fail to realize that we have always been in the presence of God. And we know that because this is literally what the passage tells us. The passage says that he went out to stand on the mountain. Elijah's thinking, I'm going out on the mountain so that God can show me his presence. But what does the text tell us? He was already in the presence of the Lord. He had just missed it. He was looking for something else. He was expecting God to do something else. But in this moment, in the stillness and the quiet of the moment, Elijah was with God, and God was with him. So that brings us back to the question. Do you remember the question we've been asking today? So where's God? He's right there with you. He's always been right there with you. And maybe you're thinking, well, I just don't feel his presence. I don't experience his presence in my life. I wonder, could it be that you have been looking, that I have been looking, that we have been looking for God in all the wrong places? Could it be that we've been expecting God to move in this epic way, but at the whole time, God's saying, if you would just slow yourself enough, if you would just make yourself present in this moment, you would experience in the quietness of your mind, in the stillness of your heart, that I'm right here with you. Now that's harder to do than it is to say. Because the reality is, for so many of us, we live fast-paced lives. We have so many things going on, so many events to get to, so many things to check off our to-do list, so many of the things that I was doing that morning as I was hanging out with my wife. So many things that fill our time and distract us from being present with God in a moment. And the thing about our culture that I think is unique, that we have to figure out how we wrestle with this, how we deal with this, is that in our culture today, we seem to wear busyness as a badge of pride. Look at all the stuff that I have going on. Look at all the boxes that are filled in my calendar. Like somehow, if we're busy, it means we're achieving. If we're busy, we've somehow arrived. But what I just know to be true in my life, and I know it to be true as I've talked with others, is that the busier that we get, the more that we fill our time, the more that we fill our calendars, the more stuff we do, seemingly, the more distant the presence of God becomes. It's because we focused on something else. In the midst of all of this, we keep asking this question: God, where are you? Where are you? My life's falling apart. God, where are you? I don't know how I'm going to pay the mortgage. God, where are you? I don't know how I'm going to pay the medical bills. I don't know how I'm going to get through to my kids, to have them make better choices. God, where are you? You know what God says? This is what God says. I'm right here. I've always been right here. I've never left your side. You've just gotten so busy. Did you stop being present? There's another prophet in the Old Testament. He would say this, and his name's Zephaniah. He would say this in Zephaniah chapter 3. He says, "The Lord your God is in your midst, a mighty one who will save. He will rejoice over you with gladness. He will quiet you by his love. He will exult over you with loud singing." God has always been right there with you. Zephaniah says God is always there next to you. We keep asking the question, where's God? Where's God? Where's God? God asks this question. He says this: where are you? What point did you decide to opt out of the conversation? Where are you? Have you carved out enough space in your life, enough space in your day to sit in the stillness and the presence of God? Are you slowing down? Are you carving out time? And I know even as you begin to think of that, like so many of us, we wrestle with the other reality. We wrestle with some of the mistakes that we've made, some of the decisions that we've done, some of the choices we've made in the past or currently live in, and we find ourselves buying into this lie that we're not worthy of being in the presence of God. And so we honestly keep running, we keep filling our time, we keep going in different directions. And what I love about God is no matter what we've done, no matter what our past says about us, no matter what we're even wrestling with in the present, God is always there, saying, where are you? Come here. Let me give you a hug. Let me put my arms of love around you. Because I've always been by your side every single day, through every high and through every single low. And you know what? Mothers are a whole lot like God in that way. See, mothers have this incredible capacity to love beyond themselves. I mean, mothers have this amazing ability to invest their lives in someone else, which is literally becoming less and less common in our world today. But it's so many of our moms that lead the way in that they literally show themselves to be examples of sacrifice and of love. And what I appreciate so much about moms is it's through moms, it's through their sacrifice, it's through their presence, it's through their love that we get this glimpse of what's possible in God. We get a glimpse, a taste of the fullness of love that God brings for us. And so I want to take a moment as we wrap up here today to say thank you to our moms. Thank you for giving of yourself. Thank you for investing your life in someone else. Thank you for your presence and your undying love. Thank you for being an example of who God is in so many of our lives. I told you it was a Mother's Day story. Let's pray. God, I thank you for the questions that we wrestle with. And I thank you that we're honest and transparent enough to ask them, to talk about them. And I know even this one today that I've struggled, so many of us have struggled in times in our lives, wondering where you're at. But as we see through the story of Elijah, that you've always been there. And that we're hit with the reality that so many of us have filled our lives with so many things that we have lost sight of your presence. And so God, this week I pray that you would give us the power, the strength, that you would give us the courage to find a space and time to sit with you, to experience you. And God, I know that even as we leave here today, as we celebrate Mother's Day, Monday morning will come quickly. And life will happen. And so will the temptation to fall into what is just normal. So God, help us resist that temptation. Again, help us find space for you so that we might fully embrace and experience your presence in our lives. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen. As we close up this morning, just a couple things I want to make sure you are aware of. If you're newer here to Lake Sawyer, I want to invite you over to the Connection Zone. Like Jennifer mentioned, we have a gift for you if you're a first-timer's way, saying thanks for hanging out with us. And also, I know that whenever time you show up at a new church, show up at church for the first time, there's a lot of questions. And so part of what we'd love to do is just help answer any questions that you might have, help point you in the right direction. I also want to take a moment just to say Happy Mother's Day again to all the moms. We hope that you have such a wonderful, amazing day, and I want you to know, really from us here at Lake Sawyer, we're grateful for you, and from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for all that you do. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you back next week.